He thought he was in trouble when he was surrounded by wild dogs, but then the wild cat did something unbelievable. The air in the deep woods hung thick and heavy, smelling of damp earth, decaying leaves, and the resinous scent of pine. Arthur Miller paused, wiping a bead of sweat from his brow with the back of a dusty hand, and consulted the transit perched on its sturdy tripod. He squinted through the eyepiece, made a minute adjustment, and jotted a notation in the small, weather-beaten field book he carried. At 48, Arthur was a man comfortable with solitude and precision, qualities essential for his work as a land surveyor, especially on contracts like this one, mapping remote tracts of densely forested land for a timber company considering future logging operations in this rugged corner of West Virginia. For weeks, his only companions had been the relentless drone of insects, the chatter of squirrels, the occasional flash of a white-tailed deer disappearing into the undergrowth, and the demanding logic of angles, elevations, and boundary lines. He didn't mind the solitude. In fact, he preferred it. The quiet focus required by his work was meditative, a welcome contrast to the noise and complexities of his life back in the city. A life that currently consisted mainly of an empty apartment since his divorce finalized last year. Here, in the woods, the rules were clear, the challenges tangible. He worked methodically, moving his equipment deliberately through the often thick underbrush, marking points with bright flagging tape, taking readings, making notes. His days started early, driving his sturdy pickup truck as far as logging roads allowed, then hiking in with his gear to the day's starting point. He packed a simple lunch, plenty of water, basic first aid, insect repellent, and, as a precaution in these remote areas, a canister of bear spray clipped to his belt, though he'd never had occasion to use it. It was during the second week on this particular contract, while working along a ridge overlooking a steep, overgrown hollow, that he first noticed the cat. A flash of bright orange fur against the deep green shadows. It was a lean-looking tabby, clearly a stray or feral, moving with the cautious grace of a wild creature. Arthur paused, surprised to see a domestic cat this far from any discernible homestead. The cat saw him too, froze for a heartbeat, its green eyes wide, then vanished silently into a thicket of rhododendrons. Arthur didn't think much of it initially. Cats turned up in odd places. But over the following days, he saw it again several times, always in the same general area along the ridge. It seemed wary but also curious, sometimes watching him from a distance as he ate his lunch, perched on a fallen log or a rocky outcrop. It never approached, never made a sound, but its recurring presence became a small point of interest in his solitary days. Feeling a pang of sympathy for the skinny creature, Arthur started leaving a small portion of his lunch, a crust of bread, a bit of leftover chicken or tuna from his sandwich, on a flat rock near where he usually took his midday break. He'd leave it, pack up his gear, and move on with his work. He never saw the cat take the food, but the next day the offering would always be gone. After about a week of these indirect offerings, the cat grew slightly bolder. It would appear while Arthur was still eating his lunch, sitting 20 or 30 yards away, watching him intently. It still wouldn't come closer, but it no longer vanished instantly at his movements. Arthur started talking to it sometimes, just low murmurs. "Well, hello there, fella. Keeping an eye on me?" Or, "Left you a bit of turkey today. Hope you like it." He didn't expect a response, but speaking the words aloud felt less foolish than he'd anticipated in the vast quiet of the woods. He started thinking of the cat as Sparky, for its bright color and the unexpected spark of life it brought to his solitary workday. He knew, rationally, that feeding a stray wasn't always the best practice. It could create dependence, habituate wildlife unnaturally. But Sparky seemed to belong here, a wild thing navigating its own existence, and sharing a small scrap felt like a minor, harmless gesture of goodwill in the face of the indifference of the wilderness. He enjoyed the silent company, the brief connection with another living being in his otherwise solitary work environment. He didn't realize, couldn't have known, that this small, tentative link forged over shared lunch scraps was about to be tested in a way that would irrevocably alter both their lives. The afternoon was dragging on, the air growing increasingly thick and humid under the dense forest canopy. Arthur was working his way down a steep slope towards a small stream marked on his survey map, needing to establish a boundary marker near the water's edge. The terrain was difficult here. Tangled undergrowth, loose rocks hidden beneath drifts of dead leaves, fallen logs slick with moss. He moved slowly, concentrating on his footing and the readings on his handheld GPS unit. He just reached the flatter ground near the stream bank, a narrow clearing littered with smooth river stones and shaded by towering hemlocks, when the hairs on the back of his neck prickled. A low growl, deep and menacing, broke the stillness. Arthur froze, every sense instantly on high alert. He slowly raised his head, scanning the dense woods surrounding the clearing. Another growl joined the first, closer this time, coming from the thick brush to his left. He saw movement, a flicker of dark fur, then another. His heart began to pound. He wasn't alone. Slowly, deliberately, two dogs emerged from the undergrowth, blocking his path back up the slope. They were medium-sized, lean, rough-looking mixes, one predominantly black with bristly fur, the other a brindled cur with scarred ears. Their posture was stiff, heads low, teeth bared in silent snarls. Their eyes, cold and predatory, were fixed intently on Arthur. Feral dogs. Arthur felt a surge of adrenaline mixed with cold fear. He'd encountered feral dogs before, usually solitary scavengers easily scared off, but a pair acting in concert, showing clear aggression, was different, more dangerous. He slowly reached down and unclipped the canister of bear spray from his belt, holding it ready but low, not wanting to provoke them further with a sudden threatening gesture. "Easy now," he said, keeping his voice as calm and steady as he could manage, though his heart was hammering against his ribs. "Just passing through. No trouble here." His words had no effect. The black dog took another step forward, its growl intensifying. The brindled one began circling slowly to Arthur's right, trying to flank him. This wasn't just territoriality. This felt like assessment, like sizing up potential prey or a threat to be eliminated. Arthur knew he was in a precarious position, isolated, downhill from his main path, with a stream at his back limiting his retreat options. Just as he was calculating his next move, deploy the spray, try to climb a tree, make a stand with his sturdy surveyor's stake, two more dogs emerged silently from the woods behind the first pair. A scruffy terrier mix and another larger shepherd-like dog with wary eyes. A pack. 4 of them. And they were closing in, forming a loose, menacing semicircle around him. The situation had just escalated from dangerous to critical. 4 feral dogs, acting together, could easily overwhelm a lone human. Arthur tightened his grip on the bear spray, his knuckles white. He backed up slowly towards the stream, scanning desperately for any advantage, any escape route. The lead dogs, the black one and the brindled one, mirrored his movement, creeping forward, their growls deepening, bodies coiled with aggressive intent. The air crackled with tension, the quiet forest suddenly transformed into an arena of imminent violence. Arthur braced himself, readying the spray, knowing he might only get one chance. Time seemed to slow, stretching into an agonizing crawl. The feral dogs advanced, deliberate and menacing, their low growls a constant guttural threat in the humid air. Arthur stood his ground near the stream bank, bear spray held ready, his mind racing, calculating angles, distances, the sickening possibility of the encounter turning violent. He could feel the cold sweat prickling under his shirt despite the heat. The lead dog, the bristly black one, lowered its head further, muscles bunching as if preparing to charge. Suddenly, from the dense undergrowth on the slope above them, erupted a sound completely unexpected, utterly incongruous. A high-pitched, spitting yowl of pure, unadulterated feline fury. Everyone froze, Arthur, the dogs, all heads turned towards the source of the sound. A small, furry orange cannonball shot out of the bushes. It was Sparky, but not the cautious, slightly wary stray Arthur knew. This was a different creature entirely. His back was arched high, every hair on end, making him look twice his actual size. His tail was bushed out like a bottle brush. His ears were flat against his head, his mouth contorted in a vicious snarl, revealing surprisingly sharp little teeth. He landed silently on the path between Arthur and the lead dogs, spitting and hissing with a ferocity that belied his small stature. The dogs, clearly startled by this sudden, noisy apparition, hesitated. They stopped their advance, looking confused, their predatory focus momentarily broken. They had likely encountered cats before, perhaps chased them, but this tiny creature wasn't running. It was standing its ground, challenging them, the pack. Sparky didn't back down. He took another bold step forward towards the large black dog, letting out another ear-splitting yowl, followed by a rapid series of spitting hisses. He even feinted a darting movement towards the dog's face. The black dog, clearly bewildered by this miniature fury challenging its dominance, actually took a step back, shaking its head as if unsure what to make of this noisy, aggressive orange fluffball. The other dogs milled uncertainty behind him, their unified purpose dissolving into confusion. Pack dynamics relied on predictability, on established hierarchies and responses. This tiny, spitting creature defying them so brazenly didn't compute. Arthur watched, stunned into temporary inaction. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. The small, shy, stray cat he'd shared lunch scraps with was now facing down a pack of potentially dangerous feral dogs, defending him, or just defending its perceived territory. Or maybe it felt cornered itself. Whatever the reason, the effect was undeniable. Sparky's sudden, furious intervention had completely disrupted the dog's aggressive momentum. The moment stretched, taut with uncertainty. The dogs looked at the spitting cat, then at Arthur, then back at the cat, seeming unsure how to proceed. The spell of imminent attack was broken. Sparky, sensing perhaps a shift, let out one final defiant hiss before darting sideways a few feet, placing himself slightly closer to Arthur but still maintaining a defensive posture towards the dogs, his small body vibrating with adrenaline. Arthur knew instinctively this was his chance. The dogs were confused, their pack cohesion momentarily fractured by the unexpected feline assault. He had a window, perhaps only a few seconds wide, to regain control of the situation. The small orange cat, through sheer, improbable audacity, had just bought him precious time. Sparky's furious intervention hung in the air, a moment of bizarre, suspended tension. The feral dogs, clearly thrown off balance by the small cat's audacity, milled uncertainty, their aggressive focus momentarily lost. Arthur seized the opportunity Sparky's bravery had created. "Get out! Go on! Get!" he roared, finding his voice, projecting as much authority and volume as he could muster. Simultaneously, he took a large, deliberate step forward towards the dogs, raising his arms to appear larger and more threatening. He didn't deploy the bear spray yet. He hoped the combination of his sudden advance and the lingering confusion caused by Sparky would be enough. The effect was immediate. The dogs, already unsettled, reacted to Arthur's aggressive posture and loud command by shrinking back. The lead black dog hesitated for only a second before turning tail and melting back into the undergrowth. The others followed suit instantly, disappearing as quickly and silently as they had appeared, their menacing presence dissolving into rustling leaves and shadows. Silence descended on the small clearing by the stream, broken only by Arthur's own heavy breathing and the faint, lingering hiss from Sparky, who was still puffed up, tail bushed, watching intently the spot where the dogs had vanished. Arthur slowly lowered his arms, his body trembling with the receding adrenaline. He leaned heavily on his surveyor's stake, his legs feeling suddenly weak. It had been close, too close. He took several deep, ragged breaths, trying to calm his pounding heart. He looked down at Sparky. The little orange cat was slowly starting to deflate, his fur settling, his tail losing its bottle brush appearance. He glanced up at Arthur, let out a soft, slightly shaky meow, then sat down and began grooming his shoulder with intense, almost nonchalant focus, as if facing down a pack of dogs was all in a day's work. A wave of immense gratitude washed over Arthur, so strong it almost buckled his knees again. That little cat, that small, skinny stray, had quite possibly saved him from serious injury, or worse. Its improbable, fearless intervention had been the critical factor, the unpredictable element that had broken the dog's attack pattern. "Well, Sparky," Arthur said, his voice still a bit unsteady, "I owe you one. Big time." He slowly approached the cat, half expecting it to bolt now that the immediate danger was past. But Sparky just watched him come, pausing his grooming. Arthur stopped a few feet away, sank down onto a smooth river stone, and opened his backpack. He took out his water bottle and drank deeply, then unwrapped the remaining half of his sandwich, ham and cheese today. He broke off a significant piece of ham, held it out on his open palm. "Here you go, hero," he said softly. "You earned this. You earned a whole lot more than this." Sparky watched his hand, then looked at his face, then back at the ham. After a moment's hesitation, he took a tentative step forward, sniffed the offering carefully, and then delicately took the piece of meat from Arthur's palm. He retreated a few steps to eat it quickly, then looked back at Arthur, seemingly waiting. Arthur offered another piece, which Sparky took just as readily. They sat there for a while in the quiet clearing, sharing the remnants of Arthur's lunch. The fear and tension slowly dissipated, replaced by a strange sense of camaraderie born of shared crisis. Sparky, bolder now than ever before, eventually finished the last scrap and then, astonishingly, walked over and rubbed briefly against Arthur's leg before settling down nearby to groom again, purring softly, audibly. Arthur reached out a hesitant hand and gently stroked Sparky's back. The cat stiffened for only a second, then relaxed into the touch, his purr growing louder. It was the first time Arthur had touched him, the first time Sparky had allowed such closeness. The sun slanted lower through the trees, dappling the clearing in warm light. The stream murmured nearby. The threat felt distant now, unreal. Arthur knew he needed to finish his survey work for the day and needed to hike back out before dusk. But he sat there for a long time, just stroking the small, brave cat who had appeared like an unexpected fury, feeling a connection, a gratitude, and a sense of wonder that resonated deep within his solitary heart. The wilderness had shown its dangerous side, but it had also revealed an unexpected, fiercely loyal ally. The encounter with the feral dogs fundamentally changed the dynamic between Arthur and Sparky. The tentative link forged over shared lunch scraps deepened into a genuine bond, built on Arthur's profound gratitude and Sparky's seemingly newfound trust. In the following days and weeks, as Arthur continued his survey work in that section of the forest, Sparky became his regular companion. The cat seemed to anticipate his arrival each morning, often waiting near the path where Arthur parked his truck or appearing shortly after Arthur began setting up his equipment. He no longer kept a wary distance but would often sit quite close by while Arthur worked, observing with intelligent green eyes or dozing in a patch of sun. Arthur made sure to bring extra food specifically for Sparky now, small cans of cat food or pouches of tuna tucked into his backpack alongside his own lunch. He'd share his break times with the cat, talking to him quietly, stroking his increasingly glossy orange fur as Sparky purred and sometimes even kneaded his paws on Arthur's sturdy work pants. Sparky, in return, offered his quiet, steady presence, a small, warm spot of life in the vastness of the woods. Arthur found himself looking forward to seeing the cat each day, his presence breaking the monotony of the solitary work, easing the quiet loneliness he rarely admitted to feeling. He learned Sparky's habits, his preferred napping spots, his uncanny ability to appear silently just as Arthur was about to open his lunch, his intense focus when stalking a grasshopper. He noticed the cat was filling out, the lean frame less sharp, the orange coat thicker and brighter now with regular, nutritious meals. Sparky, while clearly more comfortable with Arthur, retained a core of wildness. He was still jumpy at loud, unexpected noises and wary if Arthur moved too suddenly. He never allowed himself to be picked up or confined. He would appear each morning and disappear back into the woods each evening as dusk fell, maintaining his independence. Arthur respected that, understanding that their bond existed within the context of the wilderness Sparky called home. He often thought about the fierce display Sparky had put on against the dogs. Where had that courage come from? Was it territorial, protective, or just a desperate gamble by a cornered creature? He'd likely never know for sure. But whatever the motivation, the result was undeniable. Sparky had stood his ground, created a diversion, and Arthur was safe because of it. The debt felt immense. As the weeks passed and Arthur's surveying contract neared its end, a growing unease settled over him. His work in this section of the forest would soon be finished. He'd move on to another area, then eventually back to his apartment in the city. What would happen to Sparky then? The occasional handouts from other hikers, if any ever came through this remote area, wouldn't be enough. The feral dogs were still out there. Winter was coming eventually, bringing hardship even for a resourceful survivor like Sparky. The thought of leaving him behind felt increasingly wrong, almost like a betrayal. This small cat, who had shown such improbable bravery, who had become his unexpected wilderness companion, deserved better than to be left to fend for himself again after having known kindness and regular meals. Arthur started testing the waters, trying to gauge Sparky's tolerance for closer human proximity. He brought an old towel from his truck one day and sat on it near Sparky during lunch, letting the cat sniff it. He tried gently coaxing Sparky closer with treats, rewarding any tentative approach. He talked constantly, hoping the familiar sound of his voice would build further trust. He knew capturing a semi-feral cat, even one becoming habituated, would be difficult and stressful for the animal. He'd need a plan, a proper carrier, and a good deal of patience, maybe even some luck. But as he looked at Sparky dozing peacefully in the sun near his tripod one afternoon, a fierce protectiveness surged within him. He couldn't leave him. He wouldn't. This small, brave creature had claimed a space in his solitary life, and Arthur knew with growing certainty that their shared path wouldn't end when his survey lines did. He had to find a way to bring Sparky home. The last week of Arthur's contract was dedicated as much to Operation Sparky as it was to finalizing his survey data. He purchased a sturdy, comfortable cat carrier, leaving it open near his lunch spot each day, placing treats inside to entice Sparky to explore it voluntarily. He handled the cat more often, brief strokes turning into longer petting sessions, gauging his tolerance, letting him get used to the feel and scent of his hands. Sparky remained wary of being confined, but seemed increasingly relaxed in Arthur's presence. The challenge was timing. Arthur needed to coax Sparky into the carrier willingly, or at least with minimal force, right before he was ready to leave the site for the final time. He worried about traumatizing the cat, potentially undoing the trust they had built. On his very last day in that section of the woods, Arthur packed up his surveying equipment with a sense of finality and nervousness. He sat down for his last lunch break on the ridge, Sparky appearing moments later as usual. Arthur placed the open carrier nearby, lining it with his own familiar-smelling flannel shirt and placing a generous portion of Sparky's favorite canned tuna inside. He ate his own lunch slowly, talking quietly to the cat, trying to project calm. Sparky eyed the carrier, sniffed the enticing aroma of the tuna, looked at Arthur, then back at the carrier. He seemed to hesitate, torn between caution and desire. After several long minutes, hunger won out. Sparky cautiously crept into the carrier, planting his front paws firmly so he could reach the food while keeping his escape route clear. This was Arthur's chance. Moving slowly but deliberately, he reached over and gently swung the carrier door shut, latching it securely just as Sparky realized he was confined. The reaction was immediate, though thankfully brief. Sparky let out an angry yowl and scrambled against the mesh door for a few seconds, panicked. Arthur spoke to him constantly, soothingly. "It's okay, Sparky. It's all right, boy. You're safe. We're going home." Whether it was the familiar voice, the scent of Arthur's shirt, or simply resignation, Sparky's panic subsided quickly. He settled down in the carrier, watching Arthur with wide, uncertain eyes, but no longer fighting. Arthur let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. The hardest part was over. The hike out, carrying his gear and the surprisingly heavy cat carrier, was strenuous but filled with a sense of accomplishment. The drive back to Arthur's temporary lodging near the closest town, and then, a few days later, the longer drive back to his apartment in the city, were punctuated by Sparky's occasional questioning meows, which Arthur answered patiently. Introducing Sparky to domestic life was another adjustment. The apartment felt confining after the open woods. Sparky spent the first few days mostly hiding under the sofa, emerging only for food, water, and the litter box Arthur provided. Arthur let him set the pace, keeping the environment calm, his routine predictable. Slowly, Sparky began to explore his new territory. He discovered the comfort of soft cushions, the fascination of watching traffic from the window, the simple joy of a warm, safe place to sleep without fear. He remained independent, not overly demonstrative, but his bond with Arthur was the clear anchor in his new world. He'd greet Arthur at the door, follow him from room to room, often settle quietly nearby while Arthur read or watched television. Arthur decided the name Sparky suited him perfectly, a reminder of the spark of courage he'd shown, the spark of life he'd brought back into Arthur's own quiet existence. But sometimes, looking at the cat curled peacefully on the rug, Arthur would quietly call him Guardian. Guardian of the Ridge. His guardian. He never forgot that terrifying afternoon in the woods, the circle of menacing dogs, the sudden appearance of the small orange fury. He owed Sparky a debt, perhaps his life, certainly his peace of mind. Providing the cat with a safe home, regular meals, and quiet companionship felt like a small repayment. But more than that, it felt like a privilege. Sparky, the wild stray, the unlikely hero, had become family. And Arthur Miller, the solitary surveyor, found his own world immeasurably richer, warmer, and less lonely, thanks to the enduring presence of the small, brave guardian who had walked out of the wilderness and into his heart. The girl was feeding a stray cat, but one day, something terrible happened. What secret could a wary stray cat possibly carry, tied crudely to its collar? It's not just a lost trinket, it's a desperate plea for help. Discover how a retired librarian's simple act of feeding a stray led her to unravel a shocking mystery involving a hidden key, a trapped neighbor, and a silent black cat turned unwitting messenger in a race against time. Want to hear the full, heartwarming story? Subscribe to our channel, like this video, and listen now. The routine was the highlight of Clara's quiet day. 5 o'clock, a small bowl of dry food, and the silent company of the stray cat she called Ink. He'd be waiting, a sleek black shadow blending into the deeper shadows of the alley behind her apartment building, his wary yellow eyes tracking her every move. Today was no different. He appeared as she rounded the corner, materializing from behind the overflowing recycling bins. But as he trotted closer, keeping his usual cautious distance, Clara felt a prickle of unease. Something was wrong. Ink seemed agitated, more skittish than usual, his tail twitching nervously. He wasn't focused on the food she was about to pour. Instead, he kept rubbing insistently against the leg of an old, discarded wooden crate near the wall, making small, distressed meowing sounds unlike his usual silence. Then she saw it, tied clumsily around the worn, thin collar Ink always wore, a collar she'd assumed was just a remnant of some long-lost owner, was a small, dirty bundle of cloth, secured with what looked like rough twine. It hadn't been there yesterday. Ink nudged the bundle with his nose, then looked up at Clara, a pleading urgency in his meow. Her heart began to pound. This wasn't normal. Where had this come from? Who would tie something to a wary stray cat? Was it a prank? Or something else? Ink rubbed against the crate again, then pointedly at the bundle on his collar. He seemed desperate for her to notice, to understand. Hesitantly, Clara knelt, keeping her movement slow. Ink allowed her closer than usual, his agitation palpable. With trembling fingers, she carefully worked at the crude knot of twine. It came loose, and the small cloth pouch fell into her hand. It was surprisingly heavy for its size, made of rough, stained canvas. She looked at Ink, whose yellow eyes stared back intently. Taking a deep breath, she loosened the drawstring top of the pouch. Inside, nestled amongst dusty lint, wasn't a note, but something cold, hard, and metallic. She tipped it into her palm. It was an old, ornate-looking skeleton key, the kind used for antique locks or furniture, tarnished with age and disuse. Clara stared at the key, then back at the agitated cat. A stray cat delivering a mysterious key. It felt like something out of a bizarre fairy tale, but Ink's genuine distress made it feel chillingly real. Where had he gotten this? Who had tied it to him? And what locked door was this strange key meant to open? The weight of the key felt heavy in her hand, heavy with unanswered questions and a sudden, inexplicable sense of foreboding. Clara Dubois considered herself firmly settled in the quiet rhythms of retirement. After 35 years as a meticulous librarian, her days were now ordered by books, tending her small balcony garden and her daily 5 o'clock rendezvous with Ink. She lived alone in a modest apartment in an older brick building, one of several lining an alleyway shared with a few small businesses and another, slightly more dilapidated apartment block across the way. She cherished her solitude, but the appearance of Ink several months ago had added an unexpected bright spot to her routine. He was a strikingly handsome black cat, sleek and well-formed, despite the clear hardships of street life. His wariness was profound. He never allowed her to touch him, snatching the food she left and retreating to the shadows to eat. The thin, worn collar he wore suggested a past life with humans, but he seemed to have rejected that world entirely, except for his daily, silent transaction with Clara. She respected his boundaries, content just to offer a reliable meal and observe his cautious grace. The neighborhood was a typical urban blend: aging apartment buildings, a corner store, a laundromat, the back entrances of shops that fronted the main street. Clara knew few of her neighbors well, exchanging polite nods, but mostly keeping to herself. The building across the alley, number 417, was particularly anonymous, its windows often dark, its tenants seemingly transient or intensely private. She occasionally saw an elderly man shuffling out with groceries, but knew nothing about him. Finding the key tied to Ink's collar shattered Clara's peaceful routine. It was too strange, too deliberate to be random. Ink's agitation was undeniable. He wasn't acting normally. He seemed burdened, anxious, his usual caution replaced by an urgent need to communicate something he couldn't vocalize. After he finally ate a few bites of food that evening, Clara watched him slip away, not into the usual shadows behind her building, but across the alley, disappearing near the darkened fire escape of number 417. Clara held the heavy brass key, its intricate teeth seeming to mock her with their silence. Her librarian instincts kicked in: research, analyze, deduce. But this wasn't a misplaced footnote. It felt like a cry for help delivered by the most unlikely messenger. Ignoring it felt impossible, irresponsible even. What if someone was in trouble? What if Ink was their only hope, and she was the one he had chosen or been forced to deliver the message to? The weight of the key, combined with Ink's unusual behavior and his disappearance towards the mysterious building opposite, solidified Clara's decision. She couldn't simply dismiss it. She had to try and understand what it meant. Her innate sense of order, her compassion for the cat who had somehow become entangled in this, and a flicker of librarian's curiosity about the unsolved puzzle compelled her to act. Her initial goal formed: investigate the key's origin, starting with the building Ink seemed connected to, number 417, and determine if the strange delivery signified someone in genuine distress. She slipped the key into her pocket, the cold metal a tangible reminder of the mystery she now felt obligated to unravel. Clara's investigation began cautiously the next day. Holding the strange key, she walked over to the apartment building at 417, studying its worn brick facade and slightly grimy windows. It had 4 floors, accessed by a narrow shadowed entryway. There was no doorman, just a simple buzzer panel with names listed next to apartment numbers. Most were faded or missing. She scanned the list: Henderson, 1A, Petrov, 3B, Garcia, 4A. Nothing immediately jumped out. She decided to focus on Ink. She made a point of being in the alley earlier than usual for his feeding time, hoping to see where he came from. After waiting patiently for nearly an hour, she saw him emerge, not from the street or the far end of the alley, but slipping out from beneath a loose basement grating belonging to number 417. He seemed tired, thinner than yesterday, and there was no new message on his collar. He ate quickly, distractedly, then immediately tried to slip back towards the grating. Clara tried talking to Mrs. Gable, the elderly woman who ran the corner store nearest the alley. That black cat, the stray, do you ever see where he goes? Clara asked casually while buying milk. Mrs. Gable sniffed. That one? Always skulking around 4 to 17. Wouldn't be surprised if old Mr. Petroff in 3B leaves his window open. He's a bit eccentric. Keeps to himself entirely since his wife passed. Petroff, 3B. The name resonated. Could the key be for his apartment or something inside it? Clara felt a growing unease. Mr. Petroff was the elderly man she occasionally saw shuffling along. He seemed frail. She decided to try buzzing apartment 3B. She pressed the button, listening to the faint buzz echo inside. No response. She tried again. Silence. Mail was visible through the slot in the entryway door for 3B, but it wasn't overflowing. Maybe he was just out, or sleeping, or didn't answer the buzzers. Her attention returned to Ink over the next few days. He seemed increasingly stressed. His sleek black coat was losing its luster, and he appeared thinner, eating less ravenously than before. He continued his pattern of emerging from near the 417 basement and retreating there after eating. Clara felt a growing sense of urgency, convinced the cat's well-being was somehow tied to the mystery of the key and Mr. Petroff. She tried buzzing 3B again on different days, at different times. Still no answer. She considered leaving a note, but what would she say? "Your cat delivered a key. Are you okay?" It sounded ludicrous. One afternoon, she saw Ink slip back under the grating and decided to investigate the basement entrance herself. The grating was loose, but the space beneath looked dark, damp, and uninviting. As she peered down, a sharp voice startled her. "Can I help you?" It was Mr. Henderson from 1A, a younger, gruff-looking man Clara recognized vaguely. He eyed her suspiciously. "Looking for something?" Clara mumbled an excuse about dropping her keys and quickly retreated, feeling flustered and attracting unwanted attention. Her discreet investigation was proving difficult. She debated calling the police for a wellness check on Mr. Petroff, but her evidence felt flimsy. An old man not answering his buzzer wasn't a crime. An eccentric stray cat carrying a key wasn't proof of anything. She pictured the dispatcher's skeptical response. She felt stuck, holding a key that felt increasingly like a burden, worried about both the unseen Mr. Petroff and the stressed messenger cat, Ink. She confided in her daughter via phone, who lived out of state. Emily was concerned, but urged caution. "Mom, don't put yourself in danger. Maybe the cat just found the key somewhere. Maybe Mr. Petroff is just on vacation." But Clara's intuition told her otherwise. Ink's distress felt too real. Several more days passed. Clara's anxiety grew with each unanswered buzz at apartment 3B and each sighting of the increasingly stressed Ink. The cat was definitely losing weight, his movements less fluid, his yellow eyes clouded with worry. He still met Clara for food, but seemed to be doing so out of sheer necessity, quickly retreating towards the basement grating of 4 to 17 afterwards. Then one morning, Ink didn't appear at all. Clara waited, calling his name softly, her stomach churning with dread. He never missed a feeding. She checked again at lunchtime and again in the early evening. Nothing. Panic began to set in. Had something happened to him? Was his disappearance connected to Mr. Petroff? The fear for Ink overrode Clara's hesitation about involving authorities or neighbors. She couldn't wait any longer. She marched purposefully back to Building 4017 and located the buzzer for the building superintendent. whose name, J. Riley, was listed next to Supt. She pressed it firmly. After a moment, a voice crackled through the speaker. "Yeah? My name is Clara Dubois. I live across the alley," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I'm very concerned about one of your tenants, Mr. Petrov in 3B. I haven't seen him in well over a week. Mail is piling up slightly and, well, I have reason to believe he might be unwell or need assistance." She decided against mentioning the cat and the key for now. There was a pause. "Petrov?" "Yeah, he's quiet," the super's voice replied, sounding unconvinced. "Probably fine. Doesn't like being bothered." "Could you possibly just knock on his door?" Clara pressed. "Just a quick wellness check? I'd feel much better." The super sighed audibly. All right. Give me 10 minutes." Clara waited anxiously in the alley, peering up towards the third-floor windows. After what felt like an eternity, the superintendent, a portly man wiping grease from his hands, emerged from the front entrance of 417. He saw Clara and ambled over. "No answer," he stated flatly. Knocked loud, called out, nothing. "Did you try opening the door?" Clara asked. "Don't have a master key for tenant locks," he grumbled. "Look, lady, he probably went upstate to visit his sister or something. He does that sometimes without telling anyone." Just as Clara's hope began to deflate, a faint, desperate sound reached them from above, a scraping, scratching noise immediately followed by a weak, muffled meow. It was coming from the direction of 3B's window. "Did you hear that?" Clara gasped. The super frowned, listening. The sound came again, frantic scratching and a weak meow. It was Ink. "That cat!" the super exclaimed. "Thought I got rid of him. Must be stuck inside Petrov's place." The sound of Ink trapped inside Mr. Petrov's apartment galvanized them. This wasn't just an unresponsive tenant anymore. An animal was potentially in distress inside. The super used his pass key to open the main building door, and they hurried up the dimly lit stairs to the third floor. The scratching and meowing grew louder as they approached 3B. The super used a tool to bypass the main lock and push the door open. The smell hit them first: stale air, neglect, and sickness. The apartment was cluttered, but not filthy. And there, on the floor near the hallway, lay Mr. Petrov. He was conscious, barely, eyes fluttering open, looking terribly frail and pale. He had clearly fallen days ago and couldn't get up. His phone lay uselessly on a table just out of reach, and beside him, looking thin and exhausted but overjoyed to see people, was Ink, who must have slipped in through an open window or been accidentally shut inside days ago. Ink immediately ran towards Clara, meowing insistently, then back towards Mr. Petrov. Clara rushed to Mr. Petrov's side while the super called 911. Mr. Petrov weakly lifted a trembling hand. "The key," he whispered, his voice raspy. "Ink, good cat, tried to help." He confirmed Clara's suspicion, realizing he couldn't reach his phone after the fall, and seeing Ink appear on his window ledge, a frequent occurrence apparently, he had, in a moment of desperate clarity, tied the old spare key to his medicine cabinet, which held emergency supplies, to Ink's collar, using a strip of cloth torn from his shirt, hoping the cat would somehow deliver it to someone outside. When that failed, Ink had somehow gotten inside and become trapped with him, his presence perhaps the only thing keeping the old man's spirits from failing completely. Clara felt tears welling up. She had been right. The key, the cat's agitation, it was all real. Ink hadn't just delivered a message. He'd stayed with the person in distress when his mission failed. Her quiet act of feeding a stray had led her here to saving a life. Her role shifted in that moment from curious observer to vital rescuer, validating every nagging intuition. She knew then she couldn't abandon either of them. Ensuring Mr. Petrov received care and securing a safe future for his unlikely feline messenger became her immediate, undeniable purpose. Paramedics arrived swiftly, assessing Mr. Petrov and preparing him for transport to the hospital. He was severely dehydrated and weak, but coherent, repeatedly murmuring thanks to Clara and asking about Ink. Clara reassured him she would look after the cat. As Mr. Petrov was carried out, Ink watched anxiously from the doorway, refusing to leave the apartment until the stretcher was gone. Clara, with the super's permission, gave Ink fresh water and food she hurried back to fetch from her own apartment. The cat devoured it gratefully. While he ate, Clara looked around the small, cluttered apartment, filled with books, old photographs, and the lingering scent of loneliness. It was clear Mr. Petrov had been struggling on his own for some time. Over the next few days, Clara became the unexpected link between Mr. Petrov and Ink. She visited the old man in the hospital daily. He was recovering slowly, but was immensely cheered by her visits and her news about Ink. He explained that Ink had started visiting his third-floor window ledge months ago, perhaps climbing the fire escape. Mr. Petrov, lonely after his wife's passing, began leaving scraps out for the handsome black cat. He never touched Ink, never formally invited him in, but a silent understanding developed. Tying the key to the collar was an act of pure desperation after his fall. He was filled with gratitude for Clara's persistence and Ink's loyalty. His primary worry now, however, was his future and Ink's. Doctors advised he wouldn't be able to live alone safely anymore. Assisted living seemed the likely next step. "But what about Ink?" he'd ask Clara, his voice filled with worry. "They won't let me keep a cat, especially a stray." Clara faced the same dilemma. Ink was now temporarily living with her. He was slowly adjusting, still wary of sudden movements, but clearly grateful for regular meals and safety. He'd even begun cautiously rubbing against her legs or occasionally settling near her on the sofa, though never quite relaxing enough for a full cuddle. He was still technically a stray, and his future was uncertain. The worn collar was his only link to a past before Mr. Petrov, a past Clara couldn't uncover. Complication arose when Mr. Petrov's only living relative, a nephew from out of state, finally arrived. He seemed more concerned with sorting out Mr. Petrov's finances and apartment than with the elderly man's emotional well-being, and he expressed absolutely no interest in taking responsibility for that stray cat. He made it clear that once Mr. Petrov was settled elsewhere, the cat was Clara's problem or animal control's. This setback strengthened Clara's resolve. She couldn't let Ink end up in a shelter, potentially deemed unadoptable due to his age and lingering wariness. She felt a deep responsibility, not just because she fed him, but because he had been instrumental in saving Mr. Petrov. She began researching assisted living facilities in the area, specifically looking for ones that were pet-friendly, even for cats without a documented history. The search was discouraging. Rules were strict, waiting lists long, and exceptions rare. She also spent more time patiently working with Ink, trying to build his trust, hoping to make him seem more adoptable if it came to that. She bought him toys, which he regarded with suspicion, a scratching post, which he ignored, and a soft bed, which he occasionally used. Progress was slow. He remained a creature of ingrained caution. Clara felt the pressure mounting. Mr. Petrov was getting ready for hospital discharge, needing placement soon. Ink needed a secure future. Clara felt like she was failing them both. She sat one evening, watching Ink sleep fitfully in his bed, the weight of the situation heavy on her shoulders. This was her dark night. Had she taken on too much? Then an idea sparked. What if Ink wasn't just a pet, but could be classified as a companion or emotional support animal for Mr. Petrov? His calming presence was undeniable. Perhaps there was a way to formalize that role. She started making calls again, this time to organizations specializing in animal-assisted therapy and elder care advocacy groups, explaining the unique circumstances. She also decided to get Ink fully vetted, microchipped in her name for now, and gather any documentation she could about his temperament from her own experience, and maybe even a note from the vet who treated him initially. She needed to build a case for keeping Ink and Mr. Petrov together. It was a long shot, requiring navigating bureaucracy and finding a facility willing to see beyond the label of stray, but it was the best hope she had. Clara's persistence paid off, leading her to Maple Creek Assisted Living, a facility known for its slightly more progressive approach to resident well-being. After numerous calls and emails, sharing Mr. Petrov's story and emphasizing Ink's documented role in his rescue and potential as a vital emotional support companion, the facility director, Ms. Evans, agreed to a trial meeting. The condition was strict. Ink had to pass a temperament assessment by their consulting animal behaviorist, and Mr. Petrov had to be stable enough for the transition. The day of the assessment felt monumental. Clara brought Ink, now healthier and slightly less wary thanks to weeks in her care, to Maple Creek in a carrier. Mr. Petrov, frail but hopeful, waited in a quiet lounge area designated for the meeting. The behaviorist, a calm professional named Dr. Lee, observed Ink carefully as Clara let him out. Ink was initially tense in the unfamiliar environment, staying close to Clara. Dr. Lee didn't rush. She simply sat quietly, observing his body language. After a few minutes, Clara gently encouraged Ink towards Mr. Petrov. The cat approached the elderly man slowly, sniffed his outstretched hand, and then, to everyone's quiet relief, rubbed his head against Mr. Petrov's leg and jumped lightly onto the adjacent cushion, settling down with a soft sigh. Mr. Petrov's face lit up with a frail smile, reaching out to gently stroke Ink's dark fur. Ink leaned into the touch, starting a low purr. Dr. Lee observed their interaction, the cat's clear comfort with the elderly man, Mr. Petrov's visible relaxation in the cat's presence. She asked Clara a few questions, watched Ink remain calm, even when a nurse briefly entered the room. After about 30 minutes, Dr. Lee nodded. "His wariness seems situational, not aggressive," she concluded, "and his bond with Mr. Petrov is undeniable. Given the circumstances and the potential therapeutic benefit for Mr. Petrov's transition, I see no reason to object. He passes." Relief washed over Clara so intensely she felt lightheaded. Ms. Evans, the director who had been observing quietly, smiled. Well then, Mr. Petrov, it looks like you'll have a roommate. Welcome to Maple Creek, both of you." The arrangement was secured. Ink, the stray cat messenger, would remain with the man whose life he helped save. The transition wasn't instantaneous, but it was successful. Mr. Petrov settled into his comfortable room at Maple Creek, his health steadily improving with regular care and, crucially, the constant companionship of Ink. The cat adapted remarkably well, quickly learning the rhythms of the facility. While still cautious with strangers, he became the unofficial mascot of Mr. Petrov's wing, often found napping in a sunny spot in his owner's room, or calmly observing the comings and goings from a favored armchair. His serene presence had a noticeable calming effect, not just on Mr. Petrov, but on other residents who enjoyed seeing him. Clara visited them often, her heart swelling each time she saw Ink curled contentedly on Mr. Petrov's lap, the old man gently stroking his fur, both seeming utterly at peace. Ink even started allowing Clara more affection, a silent acknowledgement of her role in his new life. The surprise that resonated wasn't just the dramatic rescue, but the quiet miracle of how a simple, routine act of kindness, feeding a hungry stray, had snowballed into saving a life, uncovering a hidden bond, and creating a unique support system against all odds. The key, Clara realized, had unlocked more than just a door. It had unlocked compassion, connection, and a second chance for both man and cat. Clara continued her quiet life, but it felt richer now, imbued with the knowledge of the difference she had made. Her daily walks past the alley felt different. The space Ink left behind wasn't empty, but filled with the satisfying memory of his journey. Sometimes, volunteering at Maple Creek, she would simply sit and watch Mr. Petrov doze in his chair, Ink a sleek black shadow, purring on the windowsill nearby, a testament to resilience and the profound, unexpected ways lives can intertwine. The story of the librarian, the lonely old man, and the stray cat who carried a key became a quiet legend at Maple Creek, a gentle reminder that help can arrive in the most mysterious ways, and that true companionship knows no bounds of species or circumstance. And often, the greatest rewards come simply from noticing and from choosing kindness.